Alright guys, here we go. Today's video should be pretty interesting because we're going to take a look at 4 of the latest demanding popular games on the brand new Nvidia RTX 5060 at 1080p and 1440p. Now, since there's quite a bit of drama surrounding this card at the moment, it's very important that I make a statement before we start. This card was not given to me by anyone. I purchased it with my own money, and no agreements or review guidelines have been given between me and a third party. Now, the card is an ASUS Prime MSRP model, and that's what I paid, $299 USD from Micro Center. It's a pretty light and compact model, especially if you compare it to something like my tough RTX 4090. But anyway, let's begin with Doom the Dark Ages. We're going to begin with 1080p native DLAA Ultra Nightmare settings. And since I'm currently on chapter 10 at the very beginning, well, that's what we're going to take a look at. The game loads pretty quickly, as you'd imagine. We're getting around 80 FPS or so. Now, it's important to keep in mind that there are some areas in the game that can be a little bit more demanding than others, but this one I felt was kind of in the middle. But anyway, yeah, so far the 5060 seems to be doing pretty well. I have overclocked it slightly, and it's very, very efficient. I mean, 130 watts, I haven't seen that type of power consumption in years. But the biggest concern about this card is obviously the 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Is that enough for 2025? I mean, even at 1080p, and that's kind of what we're going to find out in this video, and one of the main reasons why I wanted to buy it for the channel, so that we can take a look at it and see how it does. Native 1080p DLAA is good enough, but what about DLSS quality? I would go with DLSS quality in this case just because it looks really good and we should get a nice chunk of FPS. And as you guys can see, we went from the 80s to 110s or so. Now, I've also added render latency in the metrics because we're also going to take a look at multi-frame generation. This is my very first RTX 5000 GPU, and I've always wanted to take a look at multi-frame generation, especially now that I have a 240Hz OLED display. It's kind of what that tech was made for, and I've heard from people that I trust say that it actually works pretty good. But frame generation also costs some VRAM, so will we run into a VRAM issue in Doom the Dark Ages? Well, I'll show you later that you can, and how you can overcome it as well. But the important takeaway here is that frame generation or not, you can get close to 100 FPS with just DLSS quality at 1080p, and that's pretty good for a game like this that's very graphically demanding to begin with. So then, with DLSS quality only, we're at around 100 FPS and 20 milliseconds of latency. We'll begin with just regular DLSS frame generation, so times 2. That takes us to 160, from 100 to 160 with 25 milliseconds of latency. So we did get a little bit of an increase in latency, but it's not too bad, around 5 milliseconds. And if we jump over to times 3, MFG, we go from 160 to 211 FPS with 26 milliseconds of latency. Even though we increased our frame generation multiplier by 1, we didn't actually go up much in latency, just 1 millisecond. And if we increase our frame generation multiplier to times 4 now, which is the maximum as of right now anyway, who knows what happens next generation, but we now go all the way up to 260 FPS. But our latency is at 28 milliseconds, so again, it didn't go up that much. The biggest hit in latency was going from DLSS quality to turning it on. And the reason why latency didn't change much between multiplier increases actually makes sense if you think about it. Instead of inserting 1 generated frame between 2 rendered frames, we're inserting 2 or 3. But that's in the same amount of time. So the biggest concern with MFG isn't really latency as it relates to regular frame generation, but image quality, since now you're trying to simulate gameplay motion across 3 generated frames to arrive to your next rendered one. And what is the image quality like, guys? Well, I'm actually extremely impressed. This is me checking it out for the very first time. It looks really good. I don't notice any garbling or any ghosting or anything like that that is normally associated with frame generation. But I also think that the key to getting the best image quality is to obviously have a pretty high base frame rate to begin with. And we already were getting around 190 to 100 FPS anyway. So it makes sense. But it is very impressive what Nvidia have done with multi-frame generation. Now, if you were to turn multi-frame generation on and you're getting 30 FPS, I'd imagine it would look like complete trash and also feel like it too. But this actually feels and looks pretty good. I have no problem with frame generation, but if you don't like frame generation as a technology, you're obviously not going to like multi-frame generation. But anyway, that is what I see. And yeah, I am very impressed with the technology myself. It's a good tool to have, especially if you have a high refresh rate display. Now, the next thing I wanted to take a look at here was DLAA, because, well, we're already getting pretty high FPS, even with TAA. DLAA should improve the anti-aliasing, because this is DLSS transformer model that runs on this game by default. And looks like we get 60 FPS. And this is the best image quality that you could possibly get in Doom the Dark Ages at 1080p. And what about frame generation? Because 60, in my opinion, is the minimum before I turn on frame generation. So let's go ahead and check it out. We'll just throw regular frame generation on and see what happens. And what happens is that we run out of VRAM, guys, because obviously running the game at native resolution with DLAA is a bit more costly when it comes to VRAM. And as you can see here, enabling frame generation is enough to fill up that 8GB VRAM buffer and spill over to system memory. So I went ahead and added system RAM to the benchmark metrics so you guys can see this for yourself. Now, there is something that we can do to remedy the situation. If we go into the graphics settings, there is a texture pool size setting, which is set to 2048 by default, by the way. And if we lower that to 1536, that is the next drop down, and we have DLAA 60 FPS. If we go times 2, and now we jump all the way up to close to 110 FPS. So now it's working properly. Instead of cutting our frame rate in half, it's actually nearly doubling it, which is what was supposed to happen. So yeah, 8GB of VRAM just really isn't enough for 1080p. It will be for most games, but there will be games where it's not going to be. And the fact that ray tracing and frame generation itself costs more VRAM makes this even more problematic. But even if we go to times 4, it'll still work fine, because again, instead of inserting 1 frame between 2 rendered ones, we're inserting 3. And we go from 60 to close to 200 FPS in this particular case. But lowering the texture pool size is something that we're going to have to do if we wanted to play at 1440p. So that's what we're doing here, guys. We're giving 1440p a shot, and this is native 1440p, by the way, with TAA, which would be less demanding than something like DLAA by maybe 10% or so. And as you can see, it's not enough. We're going to go ahead and turn on DLSS quality, see if we can play at 1440p with a reduced texture pool size too, by the way. And it looks like we are actually able to. We're getting around 70 FPS, but the VRAM should have increased as well, because we're targeting a higher resolution now. And while playable, I still feel that 60 FPS with a mouse and keyboard doesn't feel particularly great in this game. Well, let's try dropping DLSS down to balance, and hey, maybe we can even throw some frame generation on top and maybe be able to get even more fluid gameplay experience. But anyway, by dropping DLSS to balance, well, we gain around close to 10 FPS or so, which is pretty decent, I guess, although not the biggest increase. But we do have frame generation. Let's see if that helps us out, or is it going to be enough to throw us over the edge and run out of VRAM? Let's check it out. Alright, so we go from 73 FPS to 37 FPS, guys. So yeah, not enough VRAM to be able to do DLSS balance and frame generation at 1440p, even with the texture pool size lowered to as low as it'll go. But what about the graphical settings? Well, let's go from Ultra Nightmare to Ultra. So that's middle of the road between Ultra Nightmare and low. And that doesn't help us. We're still out of VRAM, although we are getting a little higher FPS. Let's go ahead and see if we can lower it some more. Let's go all the way down. Why not? Let's go to low. And okay, now it seems to have kicked in, right? We were getting 70 before, now we're close to 140. So I guess that's what required. I just like to play around with the settings. It kind of opens a window so we can understand how hardware works better. I mean, it's a learning experience for me and hopefully for you guys as well. And throwing on ×4, well, it looks like we go close to 200 FPS. And that was Doom the Dark Ages on the RTX 5060. Trying to see what we can do with it, but it's time to see what we can do in another Bethesda game that's even more demanding than this. And that's Oblivion Remastered. And this game, as you all probably know, is extremely demanding to begin with. On top of that, you can actually run into VRAM issues as well, which we'll go over later. But to start with, I ended up going with Benchmark King's optimized settings. 1080p, and it's a mixture of medium and high. And we're also using DLAA, guys, so native 1080p. We're going all out here with software Lumen on high. We'll also take a look at hardware Lumen as well, but there's one thing I have to mention about the footage for Oblivion Remastered. For whatever reason, the way it was captured in my capture card, it came out looking all teary and stuttery, but it's not actually. You can look at the frame time. There is a couple stutters here and there, but that's not the fault of the RTX 5060 or my 9800 X3D for that matter. It's the game, but for the most part, it actually ran fairly well, and the forest area is the most demanding area that I know of. And while 60 to 70 FPS is fine enough, I think it's good time to take a look at DLSS quality. With how much DLSS has improved, even at 1080p, actually I found it to look really good, if I'm being honest. And that takes us from very big jump, guys. We went from 60 to 70 to the mid 90s, or whatever, 80 to 90, depending on what part of the map you look at. So that is a really nice increase in frame rate here. And again, don't mind the footage, it's just the capture. The game itself actually looked very fluid, very nice. I mean, this is the perfect type of frame rate to enable frame generation with, because it should also smoothen over the little bumps as well to some extent, but maybe not. I mean, we're currently averaging around 80 FPS. We should be able to hopefully nearly double our frame rate by enabling frame generation. This is just regular frame generation, by the way, ×2. And that doesn't necessarily double our frame rate. You can't really double the frame rate when you're GPU bound. CPU bound, you might be able to, but still, that's a pretty nice increase in visual fluidity, going from mid 80s to 130. That is actually somewhat close to double. And yeah, it actually, despite of what the footage recording might look like, it actually did look very fluid. So yeah, that's actually pretty good. And I also put up the render latency up there for you guys so you can see it. It does kind of fluctuate because the frame rate fluctuates quite a bit in this game, unlike Doom. But 15 milliseconds, that's actually really good. But before we move on, I also want to take a look at ×4 MFG. And for this game, it's not going to be in the menu. You actually have to go to the Nvidia app, shut down the game, set it to ×4, and next time you enable frame generation, it'll be ×4. There we go, guys. Multi-frame generation ×4 brings us close to 240 FPS, which works out quite well if you have a 240 Hz display, like me. Now, even though this is a 4K display with a 1080p dual mode, it actually looks pretty good on that 1080p dual mode. Now, I'd imagine on a native 1080p display, it would probably look even better. But yeah, I mean, it is very playable. Now, before we dive into the downsides, I also wanted to look at hardware Lumen. So we're back to DLSS quality, no frame generation, software Lumen. Now, I'm a big fan of hardware Lumen in general, but especially in this game, it can actually improve the ambient occlusion and shadows quite a lot, actually. Reflections as well. And if you do use hardware Lumen, I would suggest disabling screen space reflections because it can look quite bad. But as you can see, even just setting hardware Lumen to low, the image quality actually, it looks a lot nicer. At least I think so. I mean, it looks a lot more like a forest. You get proper shadows, really nice ambient occlusion. I think it looks pretty nice. And as far as RTX 5060, I mean, there you have it. Benchmarking settings with hardware Lumen on low and DLSS quality at 1080p. No frame generation, by the way. I think this is actually pretty good. If you were to toggle frame generation, hey, you could probably get close to 120 FPS or something like that. But yeah, I mean, if you're aware of Benchmark King and his really good optimized settings, you can make it work. What would the experience be, though, for an average Joe who just buys a PC, installs the game, and then launches it to play it? The game chooses high as a preset. It sets itself to 1080p, which makes sense. That is the display. And software Lumen on low with DLSS set to balance. So if I was just an average Joe, I got a computer, I bought and installed Oblivion Remastered, fired it up. It's what most people do. It's what some of my friends do. And loading in, guys, the performance is terrible. Clearly, we enter some type of a VRAM limit here that just completely tanks the performance. Doesn't feel great at all. And that's the issue with 8 gigabytes of VRAM still in 2025, even for 1080p. And realistically, most games will run fine at 1080p on an 8 gigabyte card, but the fact of the matter is that some won't, and this is a very big game. Also, with upscaling being as good as it is these days, there's no reason why, say, a 1080p card should be bound to just 1080p, when this silicon itself, if it had more VRAM, it probably would be able to do 1440p no problem with more aggressive upscaling. I think that would be possible. But there you have it. Even with DLSS set to balance at 1080p, just because it's a high graphical preset, it runs out of VRAM. But let's set all the settings back to Benchmark King's optimized settings. We'll even increase DLSS to quality, restart the game, and see what happens. And there it is, guys. If we go back to Benchmark King's optimized settings, we're able to even render from a higher resolution. And tell you what, we can even enable hardware Lumen instead of software Lumen to make the game look even better. But that is a battle that you might have to fight with an 8 gigabyte VRAM card, which is unfortunate that we're still getting 8 gigabyte VRAM cards, because even for 1080p, that's not really enough. And especially with games nowadays having ray tracing and even Nvidia's own features like multi-frame generation, it requires more VRAM. So, I mean, you can forget about path tracing with this card. It's impossible. So, but anyway, maybe this will change next generation, or maybe if there was more competition, this would change. But the 9060 XT is rumored to be 8 gigabytes as well, and that one's going to be even worse, by the way, because AMD cards tend to use a little bit more VRAM than Nvidia ones. So that should be interesting as well. But yeah, it is playable with some settings tweaks. You can make the game look really good, but 8 gigabytes VRAM, not enough. Now, if 1080p can run out of VRAM on the high preset, can we even do 1440p? Well, surprisingly, guys, yes we can. So we're still with Benchmark King settings, 1440p, DLSS balance, and software Lumen low this time. And surprisingly, we're able to get around 70 FPS in the forest. So that was a bit surprising. Now, I don't think there's too much room to play around with settings additionally at 1440p, but the fact that it's doable is kind of surprising to me. And realistically, I was hoping this GPU could be like a proper competitor to consoles. And I think if it had 12 gigs of VRAM at least, it would be able to, because you would be able to target a higher resolution display. But unfortunately, with 8 gigabytes of VRAM, I would not recommend getting this card if 1440p is your resolution. 1080p, I think you should be fine 95% of the time, 90% of the time, and maybe run into an issue here and there. But 1440p, new games are going to get even more demanding when it comes to VRAM, especially games that demand you have ray tracing now. And if you want to use features like frame generation, for example, that's going to require even more VRAM. So yeah, that's the state that we're in right now, unfortunately. But that's Oblivion Remastered for you guys. Let's take a look at a game that actually ran surprisingly well. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is so far my game of the year. I'm absolutely loving this game, and the 5060 actually did surprisingly well here. We started with 1080p, epic graphical preset, and DLAA, so that is native 1080p, and we're right before a pretty big boss fight here. Getting 60 FPS, that's not too bad, but engage in the fight, and the game becomes quite a bit more demanding. So now we've dropped into the mid-40s, a lot of particles going on. Some of the fights can be quite demanding, and again, like I said, there is a lot of particles, especially in this fight, and a lot of volumetric effects, but the game looks great. I think there's room for a bit of improvement. DLSS quality is the easiest thing that we can try right away. I think this should be able to keep us at 60 FPS, no problem during this fight. And for this game, I think 60 is perfectly fine. I would just lock it at 60, and there we go, guys. 60 to 70 FPS on an RTX 5060, and it actually looks great on 1080p display. It looks great. This game is not particularly VRAM hungry, not really. Even at 4K, it does go a little bit above 8 gigs, but let's face it, you're not gonna use an RTX 5060 to play at 4K. But at 1080p, I mean, it crushes it, no problem. Unreal Engine 5 games have actually been pretty good as far as their demand on VRAM, except for Oblivion Remastered and maybe another game or two. I think Stalker is another one that can be quite VRAM hungry. But this game, you can actually max out the silicon and see exactly what it can do without having to worry about VRAM, which is nice, actually. Now, I'd go as far as saying this would be perfectly fine for this game. Lock it to 60, just enjoy enough smooth, consistent, fluid experience, but we can probably do a little bit better. I've always said that using the epic preset on an Unreal Engine 5 game especially is a bit of a waste, because dropping down can get you quite a bit more performance. And Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is no different. And we're not talking about a big drop or anything like that. We'll just go from the epic preset to the high preset. We'll keep DLSS quality. I think DLSS quality at 1080p still looks pretty good, especially if you're using the transformer model. It looks even better. But just by dropping from epic to high, well, we go from 65 FPS in this very demanding part of the game all the way up into the 80s and 90s, which is great. I mean, look at this game. It looks absolutely beautiful. And the music and the battles especially. This boss fight was actually a lot of fun. Pretty dangerous too. Well, 1080p seems to be pretty straightforward. I would say the 5060 does pretty well here, no problem at all. I think we should be able to do 1440p fairly easier than the previous two games. Alright, so now we've gone to 1440p, DLSS quality, and I'm actually using Benchmark King's optimized settings here because why not? I think the guy does a really good job, and his settings actually look pretty good. I mean, it's the best case scenario that you can do as far as optimized settings go. And right before battle, 80 something FPS. And during battles, we're in the 70s, guys. So yeah, 1440p, very doable in this game. Some tweaks, 5060 can deliver a very good experience, 60 FPS experience. Now this game does not have FSR or DLSS frame generation, but this is an excellent opportunity for me to check out another new RTX 5000 feature that I've yet to look at, and that is, it's like AMD Fluid Motion Frames equivalent. Smooth Motion, I think it's called. So yeah, let's take a look at that, right? We're getting 70 FPS. Let's turn that on and see if we can double our FPS. If it works like AFMF, that's what it should do. This is a feature that you can enable in the Nvidia app. You can enable it on a game-by-game basis, and this is also a feature that has been promised to come to RTX 4000 as well, and I don't see why an RTX 4000 GPU wouldn't be able to do this. And just like that, guys, with Smooth Motion, we go beyond 100 FPS. We nearly double our FPS. Now, it's not exactly double because it does require some processing power. AFMF actually works the same way. Turning it on, if you're GPU bound, you will lose some performance. It's not going to be exactly double, but it's pretty cool. Now, what's also different about this one is that on AMD, actually, MSI Afterburner is not able to read the generated frames from AFMF, whereas here it actually appears to be able to read them. That is why I'm also running the Nvidia overlay frame rate counter, because I thought it worked the same as AMD, but apparently not. MSI Afterburner somehow is able to read the driver generated frames, and it actually looks pretty decent, guys. I mean, we got a lot of particles and stuff happening here. It definitely looks as fluid as the frame rate suggests, and latency wise it feels fine. I've been able to parry no problem, and yeah, surprisingly good feature as well. Looking forward to checking it out on the RTX 4000. And for the last game, guys, we're doing the big one. GTA 5 Enhanced.
All right, hurry up. Get changed, all right? This is the biggest day of your sorry little life.
This is the first time that I've played Grand Theft Auto 5 on PC, and it was because of this enhanced release. That's why I like these re-releases or remasters, because they provide another opportunity to play a great game, or if you never played it before on PC but played on console, it's a good opportunity. And we have a lot of ray tracing effects here, which we've maxed all of them out, by the way. We're going with the maximum RT preset. High resolution shadows was off. Let's turn that back on. We're not even bothering with 1080p, guys. This is straight up 1440p with DLSS quality. DLSS transformer model actually looks really good in this game. As you can see, actually the 5060 does really well here. We're in the 80s, and man, this game looks so good with all the ray tracing effects. Has to be said. The reflections can look a little bit noisy sometimes, but the materials, the reflection properties on the different materials like concrete, different types of surfaces, paint, and then the global illumination, the game looks absolutely fantastic. I really do love it. But there isn't much to say about the 5060 in this particular scenario. I mean, as you can see, it is very capable, even with all the ray tracing effects. The RTX 5060 could have been so much better if it had 12 gigs of VRAM. Getting this level of performance and feature set is actually not that bad for $300 these days. But the 8 gigs of VRAM stands to get in the way with some of the latest releases and future ones to come. If you're an esports player and want to put a cheaper build together, or just an esports player in general, I actually think it's pretty decent. But I wouldn't feel comfortable recommending someone I know to buy one unless I knew their specific use case. I really wanted this GPU to be a good entry level to PC gaming or an alternative to consoles, but I just can't see this GPU coping with something like a 4K display. I mean, no matter how aggressive of upscaling you try to push, it's not going to save you from its shortcomings in some of the latest games. I got one out of sheer curiosity and to hopefully make some interesting content, but I'm not wondering if I should even keep it at all. I mean, will there be any interest, or will it sell like hotcakes anyway? I guess time is going to tell, and we'll find out anyway. But if you guys have any recommendations for games that we could maybe take a look at, leave them down below, and we'll see what happens. But anyway, thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. And please give the video a like if you liked it, and subscribe for more content. I do appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.